Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, December 26th, 2022. Still 2022. There's another week or so of that. Time for another show. Time for some more boxing. I guess it's Boxing Day. That would be a great way to spend the day today. And, I don't know. We'll see what else is going on. Besides people just running around in the street boxing one another. It seems like an odd thing to do, but hey, I don't know. That's England for you, I guess. They never bothered to explain exactly what that was all about. No Hallmark cards for Boxing Day, so I can't tell you. I read about it once. It's not punching one another. It is giving one another more gifts, and I'm not really certain why that is. I read it. I forgot it. You'll forget it too. Maybe those in England can give us a little update on whether or not that's a tradition that still means anything at all. But today, for us in our house, that means cleaning up a lot of boxes, generally speaking, is pretty much what it's all about. And the little-known ninth night of Hanukkah. It's where everybody goes to the bar after a round of Hanukkah and has drinks, a little bit like the 19th hole in golf, and it's a big deal. Everyone's doing it, and besides, it goes well with the oil. I don't know. At any rate, everything, the holy days of the holidays, I guess, are now at an end. At this point, we move into Kwanzaa, which, okay. I mean, I guess, I don't know what to say about that one. I have no lectures for you about Kwanzaa and whether or not it's real or made up. They're all made up at some level, one or another. And the rest of us can look forward to the fake New Year that happens now for those who follow the Gregorian calendar, and apparently that's a lot of you. Okay, so lots of things happened over the weekend. Hell froze over, and so did the United States of America, so make of that what you will. This seems remarkable. The weather is extraordinarily cold. We didn't get anything in the way of snow here, so we were lucky in that sense. Other places buried in snow and ice, as well as the frigid temperatures. All we had was lots of people having their heating and their heating units go out, working too hard, and aging HVAC units getting knocked out, etc., etc. All right, so what other things happening today? Well, will depend on Greg Dworkin for compiling all of those stories. Lots of information released over the weekend and heading into the weekend from the January 6th committee, of course. People spent the weekend combing over all of that. We'll see what we'll comb over what they combed over and offer you a distilled version of it. I think the thing that caught the most attention the last time I really paid attention to what was going on. It's kind of a hectic weekend. It wasn't supposed to be, but it ended up being that way. Was that, I guess, part of the release of transcripts of interviews with witnesses, etc., included comments to the effect that it was the Trump White House's impression that Maggie Haberman, the New York Times reporter, was a friendly reporter. I thought that was interesting. I mean, I guess it makes sense. She's done an awful lot to try to cultivate the sense that they could speak with her. I mean, in pursuit of the stories, I am sure. But then, along the way, we've all had questions about the way she expresses things afterwards, and I guess that's what made them think that she was a friendly person to talk to. I don't know whether they really believe that. They just wanted to say that. Maybe they thought it would be fun to release that and cause a tizzy. Not really sure. But that's the political news, I don't know, picadillo from over the weekend, I guess. Although it's probably got a lot of people pretty incensed. So we'll take it seriously, just as we did the cold weather, which, as Greg was reminding me, was responsible for, some 30 deaths across the country. It was very extreme. And when your heater breaks, if you're stuck at home and you have nowhere to go, and no warming centers available to, socialism, then you tend to freeze to death in your home. And, that can happen, especially when the cold snap reaches even down to the far south. So, I did get reports that even sunny, balmy Florida was in temperatures in the 40s, way down there. So it was pretty miserable, really, if you were stuck out in it. And if you were cozy at home, then hopefully it went a little bit better. So let's see. Other stories that warrant some attention today. I just have to kind of dive into Pocket and see what I put aside. We have lots of roundups from highlights of the January 6th committee's report, including one that I'd like to go over from Just Security, because they tend to, really burrow down into some of the more interesting things that I find fascinating. Loved this headline over at MSNBC from Steve Bannon, writing, I think, at the, let me open up and make sure at Rachel Maddow's show blog. I like the headline. In the January 6th whodunit, committee finds the one man responsible. Guess what? It's Donald Trump. But even that conclusion causing a lot of controversy because people point out that there were a lot of hands in that pot, the stew pot of January 6th, and we ought not to forget that there are organized white Christian nationalists out there who made this their party and followed orders all the way down the line, and then even embellished a little bit along the way. And there are some dangerous folks out there, not just Donald Trump. I know very much that, my suspicion is that Liz Cheney wants very much for it to focus on Donald Trump, because if she can kind of decapitate the MAGA portion of the party, I guess one view of things is that she stands to inherit the reins of the party if they regain their senses. But I don't know. I think it's a long shot. I think there'll be even a lot of moderate Republicans who didn't like the way she handled things and won't exactly be welcoming her back into the party. But perhaps there's some, still some hope of organizing a never Trump refuge for Republicans escaping the currently collapsing Republican Party, and that she might take the leadership reins of that. Or, there's a less cynical view of it, too, that she's actually just doing the right thing for the country, but she's still clearly a hardcore conservative Republican, and we're not going to agree with her on most policy issues, but I think everybody has gotten over the idea that they might have to give some credit to her. But this is where I think she's had the most influence in steering the report towards Donald Trump and away from others. I noticed some mention over the weekend that absent from most of the finger pointing in the report is Ginny Thomas, who I think may have been in days past perhaps something of a closer friend and colleague to Liz Cheney, and it might be in her interest to keep her out of that report. I'm not certain that that's the case. But Greg Dworkin is here. Let's start examining the things that he's set aside for examination. That was the purpose of his putting them aside. Good morning, Greg. How are you, and how's the boxing going?
Good morning, and it's going just fine.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, Boxing Day is the day to set aside giving gifts to the poor.
Yeah, that's the one. No wonder we don't do it in America.
Kind of a nice holiday.
Hallelujah. Yeah, well, we got rid of that right quick in America. The gifts are for rich people, everybody. Or if you prefer, you can cut off your hair to buy pocket watches, or sell pocket watches to buy combs, that sort of thing.
Right. And
that's what we celebrate about the poor.
Well,
there was once a legend.
Finish the Christmas
really
spirit,
cool.
because after all, it is the day after Christmas.
Yes, right. Oh, yeah. Let me get rid of all the Christmas stuff. I may be forced, by the way, by circumstances beyond my control, to eat Christmas cookies for breakfast during the show.
Well, it happens.
Yeah.
So just a couple of things about some of the beautiful aspects of Christmas, including Christmas carols.
Yeah, people like those.
Yeah. There was a very good show on PBS. I think it was a rebroadcast. A Larry Weinstein film called Dreaming of a Jewish Christmas. Basically, it's a documentary, and the theme there is Jews having dinner at a Chinese restaurant on Christmas.
Right.
Which is known to happen. But
yes.
the theme of the movie, the documentary, which was so interesting, is the large number of Christmas carols written by Jews for Christmas.
That's absolutely true.
like Irving Berlin,
like
like
only two or
Christmas.
three Jews, Hey, it's not all of us. Don't get upset.
Mel Torme, who co-authored Rusnut's Toasting on a Chestnut Fire.
That's a good one. It's a parody.
Right?
All right.
The famous Nat King Cole song. And the Carol of the Bells, I don't know if you knew this, is actually a Ukrainian song.
No, I didn't know that. That is interesting. Yay,
it's a beautiful Christmas.
It's one of the greats.
Carol. It's one of the greats, but it's actually Ukrainian.
All right. Not even the Ukrainian. It's just one of many Ukrainian.
So it's a beautiful Ukrainian the Christmas Carol.
Yeah, right. And now I'm imagining that they had lyrics in mind, as like, get out of here, you don't belong, that sort of thing. Like
they did, but it was about the Tsar.
Right, exactly.
And what's the difference?
I don't know. There have been, that's very interesting.
Okay. And perfectly appropriate to have this time of year. I'm just saying.
All right. I mean, this is your turn to say, so perfect timing.
Anyway, so I just thought I'd mention all of that.
Yeah, that's good.
But yes, happy Boxing Day.
Thank you. Let's all box.
And this is from a piece at Classic FM Digital Radio. What are the lyrics to Carol of the Bells and what are its origins?
Oh.
And it's instantly recognizable, irresistibly catchy. Merry, 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 Merry Christmas. That one.
Right.
In minor key. Hooks you straight in and ushers the inevitable jingle of Christmas as soon as it starts. And you might know it from Home Alone or Harry Potter 3.
Okay.
Because, songs are important when they become associated with movies.
Yes.
But the melody was taken from the Ukrainian folk chant. The lyrics are by an American composer, Peter Wolofsky.
All right. I was wondering about those lyrics. They're not original to the tune, then. Because they would be in Ukrainian, I imagine.
Yeah. So just of interest.
It's a song about borscht, everyone.
Yeah. And the other big news, of course, is the major disaster. Everybody always makes fun of Buffalo because they get a lot of snow and they're used to a lot of snow. It's not like the South where like a half inch of snow means the schools are closed for 2 weeks.
Right. For them, 18 feet. Well,
but a half a mile of snow is like a big deal.
Yeah. What?
And when you lose power and you're stuck in your cars and you can't move and it takes 3 days to get home, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So there's at least 17 dead in the Buffalo area. And Reuters noted that across the country, including Erie County, there's over 30 deaths. There's like 32 deaths reported.
Yeah, are they? Well, it could be from all sorts of things. I mean, road accidents, the cold itself.
Right, and remember, global warming means bigger storms.
Yes.
So the fact that you get storms doesn't mean there's people talking about global warming. This is because of global warming.
Yeah. There are opposite reactions to that. Well, okay. So, I mean, and they've done a good job, I think, the environmentalists trying to train us to, why not change to the word climate change words rather than global warming, even though, yes.
It's gun safety, not gun control.
Right. That's true. Yeah. It's good framing. Okay.
But it's the same temperature regardless of what you call it. And it's bad news. And things are swinging.
Yeah.
It's just like up here, it was 56 3 days ago, and then the next day it was 6, and it was 11 when I woke up this morning, and it's going to be 50s in like 2 days.
Right.
So just crazy stuff.
So everyone will blame that for their COVID. Oh, I just have a cold. I'm not going to test.
Well, COVID is back, and that's also a big deal.
Yep. It's everywhere.
And, the last thing I'll say is for those of you who actually do go to a Chinese restaurant for Christmas and then, before or after have a Christmas movie, I will say currently out Glass Onion. I'm not going to give anything away, but I'll tell you it's a very good movie and Elon Musk. I'll just say that.
All right. And onions, pardon me. I guess, as well as Glass. I don't know. All right. Well, yeah, don't ruin it. I did see the other one, but it's been a couple of years, so
Right. Well, this is different and better and very, very appropriate. All right. And the other one was good. This is very good. And this is just an outstanding movie.
Well, that's good. The sequels
are often not as good. This one is better.
Yes. Well, good. I look forward to seeing it probably on cable or something like that.
Yeah, just rent it. Go see it on one of the
Yeah, that's
one of
true.
the movie
you can get
channels.
a lot faster these days. Okay.
Stream it as the kids like to say, as fellow
Right.
kids like to say.
Yeah, they hardly know that you could go to a place where they would show movies all at once to a bunch of people on a single screen.
Right. Anyway, one of the Christmas carols that fits into that category, written by Jewish Americans to celebrate Christmas,
Not Ukrainians.
is Do You Hear What I Hear? Do You See What I See?
I hope so.
And that was written,
I'm crazy.
and
if
you
I
may
see
not have
those.
known this. I didn't know it, or at least I had forgotten it till I read it yesterday. As it was written in 1962 as a poignant response to the Cuban Missile Crisis, which
What?
people at the time thought was going to kill us all.
Well, sure. So you might think this is the testament to the creative spirit. I might say,
It's a testament to peace.
well, anything really. I would have said, don't write the carol. We're all going to die. As opposed to, well, I think we might not, or maybe we won't if I write this. Okay, very interesting. So I had no idea.
I think
I figured it was
let's put it in the
ancient.
public domain because,
Oh.
what else? But there were many "We're All Gonna Die" songs written at the time. I don't know if you knew that.
Yes.
But probably the most famous, the most
Several.
poignant, the funniest, and the best was by Tom Lehrer.
Oh, it's not a Christmas carol.
We will all go together when we go.
Well, he was right about that.
He
and
was,
that too is now in the
it's a
public
fantastic song. It's catchy. It's uplifting. And by the way, he was a genius.
domain. Yeah. Was that the reference to the public domain? Because I understand he's.
Yeah. So he did a really
Releasing all
interesting
his
thing. He
songs,
took all his music and put it in the public domain.
Mm-hmm.
So you can take any of his lyrics and you can take any of his music and do whatever you want to do with it.
That's right. Now
And
you can hear
he
what
was
he
a
hears.
really, really interesting guy. And, he's very down to earth. He was very with the people. For example, he hated interviews. So one
too.
time somebody called to ask him for an interview. And he says, I don't like interviews. I'll tell you what, though. Write down anything you want, and I won't deny it.
All right. Well, that's a good approach.
So he had a really interesting approach to the news and to, the word of the day, as it were.
Yeah.
So,
That
given
was-
that
I'm
it's
thinking
Boxing
now.
Day, the day after Christmas, I just thought I'd start my segment with all of that
Yes.
because I think it's all important.
It's great. I'm going to look up later exactly how is Do You Hear What I Hear a response to the Cuban Missile Crisis. I got to pay closer attention to the lyrics.
Oh, well,
Or you want to tell me?
if you really want to know,
I
it turns
kinda
out I
do.
included that
All right.
in the
I haven't read it yet.
Pundit Roundup today. In fact, the title of the Pundit
I'm gonna
Roundup
look.
today is Do You Hear What I Hear? Do You See What I See? And that's all about
Do I?
January 6th and how important it is and what's happening to Trump.
Okay.
But there's historical background there.
All right. I'll look if, I don't know. Oh,
Right.
look at
It's
that
not an old folk
nice
song. It was
little
written in
lamb.
1962 at the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah. Huh.
Says the story. I'm not going to go in the whole story in detail, but just
All
say
right.
the world sort of hovered on the brink of destruction for several days in October. The missiles of October.
Oh, did you want me to say that? All right.
Right? The
world-
USSR considered it a possibility that a future invasion by the U.S. might succeed, so Nikita Khrushchev decided to put some deterrents in place. But in the end, the USSR backed down, removed the missiles. It's a lot more complicated than that. It has a lot to do with back channels and the relationship between the Kennedy brothers and who to believe, and actually some pretty good leadership by JFK.
Yeah, sure.
But
Well done.
the songwriting team, who was then married, of Noel Regney and Gloria Shane Baker, who I think, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken, was Jewish, another one of those Jewish
Sounds Jewish. I mean, you never know. but-
Christmas carols, was worried along with everybody else. They've been asked to write a Christmas
very
song, but were
worried.
having difficulty. And
hard.
then in the studio, the producer was listening to the radio to see if we had been obliterated. En route to my home, I saw two mothers with their babies in strollers. Little angels were looking at each other and smiling, and all of a sudden my mood was extraordinary, and my heart was filled with poetry, and then I wrote this.
All right. And since it was October, it was plenty of time to record it for Christmas.
Right
I guess.
Do You Hear What I
Thinking
Hear?
ahead.
Took off after Bing Crosby recorded it in 1963.
Yes.
Which is really interesting because White Christmas took off when Bing Crosby did it
He's
in the 40s.
he's a kind of a magical touch for that.
And I'm old
Bing.
enough to remember when Bing Crosby was considered such a big deal. They actually made Looney Tune cartoons about him and Frank Sinatra,
Yes.
played by birds. Crosby was the parrot, if you recall, with the big pipe,
Yes.
singing "Bubba Boo."
Okay, now I remember that Bubba Boo thing. Yeah. Right, okay. I had forgotten about the fact that they were birds, but
Crosby was huge. He had his own
He
national
was.
radio show. It actually was national, but it was broadcast weirdly. Like they did one version for the East Coast and one version for the West Coast in the early infancy of radio, unlike Roots Radio, which handles all of us
right.
coast to coast.
I can only handle
With
one.
aplomb and skill, but in those days, they just
Bubba
did it
Boo.
differently.
But the original
So-
Bubba Booey.
This piece,
Yes.
even with the explosive popularity of Do You Hear, which especially took off after Bing Crosby recorded in 1963, few
Yes.
people thought of it as anything but a standard Christmas song. And The Child certainly places it within a Christmas context, but there's clues if you listen. For example, if the line, people to pray for peace everywhere, why was that in there? Sure. I mean, in biblical times, there were wars, but why specifically for peace? And the author of this piece says, I'd wondered vaguely if the line was a later addition to a standard text. And a line about the star with the tail as big as a kite. Is that the Star of Bethlehem, or is it a nuclear missile?
Yeah. That's a good question. Now I think
And the song presents to you, which future will it be?
All right, now I'm starting to get it. Nobody told me. They don't say that when they are playing it on the radio, saying another 24 hours of Christmas music. Here
Right. So,
on W,
things you
whatever
learn
that
when
is.
you look stuff up
Yeah.
that you should really think about.
Yeah. I had been stuck on thinking about Bing Crosby singing with David Bowie, which he did for a rendition of The Little Drummer Boy, as I recall.
Yeah, exactly. And then
From
I'm
Bubba Boo
recalling
to
a
Rum Pum
T-shirt somebody
Pum.
was sending around yesterday with a rather stern-looking fellow wearing it,
No.
and to channel Cassidy Hutchinson. I can't remember the exact wording, but it was to the effect of
Yes.
a stern-looking guy with a T-shirt saying, I read books, I drink coffee, I know things.
Okay.
And I'm
was
thinking,
happy to
yeah,
let you know.
I get it. So
Yeah,
me too.
okay.
I read
All right.
books, I drink coffee, I know things. I'm just telling you about what I know,
It's-
which is
I'm
like
glad.
for 24 hours because I just read it yesterday and I'm going to forget about it about tomorrow.
Okay. I mean, look, stern-looking guys these days wear T-shirts that say they burn books. So we're pleased that there are readers.
Right.
Okay.
And before we get into the meat of the show,
Yes.
one of the things that I always look forward to
Next
this
course,
time of year,
please.
besides Boxing Day, and looking up Boxing Day because I couldn't remember from year to year what it is since we don't celebrate it,
The Baltimore.
is Dave Barry's year in review.
Oh, boy.
I think he's like semi-retired, so he doesn't write all the time.
He should just every decade. He reviews decades now.
But he's got a very good piece of advice about 2022. He says the best thing about 2022 is it could have been worse. Mm-hmm. Right? We could have
We've
had
had
nuclear
worse.
Armageddon going on with the theme
again.
of
With that.
the Do You Hear What I Hear?
Right.
This briefly appeared to be possible, at least according to the president, who broke the news in October, at, why not, a Democratic Party fundraiser in the home of a wealthy donor in New York. That must have been an exciting event. One
Right.
minute, everybody's standing around cheering hors d'oeuvres, and the next moment, wait, what did he just say?
Did you say nuclear war d'oeuvres? What?
Nuclear hors d'oeuvres. The next day, after the news media ran a bunch of scary headlines, the White House explaining what the president actually meant, explained that the president wasn't suggesting we're facing Armageddon, just saying words, one of which happened to be Armageddon, so everybody should just calm down.
You know that movie Armageddon? What?
Yeah.
Yes.
And there
Go
were other
on.
positive developments in 2022. For example, millions of Americans on social media realized, it took them a while, but they finally got there, that nobody really wants to know how you did on Wordle.
No.
So, if Twitter shuts
At
down,
last.
we won't miss that, will we?
Yeah, that was never exciting for me.
For the 13th consecutive year, the New York Yankees failed to get into the World Series. And best of all, the looming apocalyptic threat of catastrophic global climate change was finally eliminated thanks to the breakthrough discovery that the solution was to throw food at art. Been staring us in the face all this
Yes.
time, and we didn't
Right.
realize it.
It's behind glass. It's
Right.
fine.
So 22 had some positives, but it wasn't good. It was the opposite of good. It was specifically bad.
Okay.
Right? We lost Angela Lansbury, Sidney Poitier, Loretta Lynn, Gilbert Gottfried, Christine McVeigh, and Meatloaf.
Yes.
Not the food, the artist.
Right. It was thrown at a painting.
Right.
Meatloaf and Gilbert Gottfried. All right.
He goes through month by month, from what's important and what's not. He reminds me of, for example, we're talking about Boxing Day. They do celebrate Boxing Day in Canada.
Okay.
So
Thanks,
February, for example, he reminds us there's trouble in, of all places, Canada. The news up there is that the capital city, Ottawa,
what's going on?
from the Algonquin word Adawe, meaning Washington.
Okay.
I like Dave Barry. Unlike some of the other humorists, he's actually funny. It is besieged by a massive protest convoy of trucks clogging the streets, honking horns, blocking traffic, and making it impossible for anybody to get anywhere. We covered it here, so I feel pretty good about this one.
Yeah. Okay, that's true. I was afraid that was happening again. All right. No, but that was a rough period for Ottawa.
Right. Now, granted,
everybody.
this is a situation every day, like in New York, but apparently in Canada it's a big deal.
On purpose, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So as tensions mount, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, in a controversial move, invokes emergency powers, enabling the government to freeze the protesters' access to beaver pelts. Because, it's Canada.
Well, that's how commerce works.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, very good article and enjoyable, and goes along with our lighthearted theme of the day after Christmas. The world's going to end.
All those things coming together. All right. Well, do you hear what we hear? It's the music that says we have to let you hear something else for 2 minutes. How about that? A nice change of pace. Okay. Ba-boo. We'll be right back.
Ba-ba-boo.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We are ready for the real news, not the news, for instance, that I kicked off the Morning Post with. I'm very excited that one of the all 24/7 Christmas movie channels is done with that now. There is apparently one that goes year-round. They're terrible movies, but they were on our television constantly during the holiday period, and it was quite annoying, and I had to go elsewhere. So I'm very Scroogey in that sense, but I like A Christmas Carol whenever they come on with versions of that one. That one I enjoy seeing interpreted differently, as opposed to the same story over and over again about the lonely widower finding love on a West Coast island, and rediscovering the Christmas spirit and saving the local businesses, that sort of thing. Very annoying.
Right. Or the young lady who, after all these years, finally figures out who the people she actually knows turns out to be an actual romantic interest.
Mm-hmm. Yes, right. They've been working together forever at the librry or what have you.
Speaking of Christmas carols, though, we do have one submitted from Merry Old England.
Okay.
Of, who is that? Alistair Sim.
It is. That one I recognize.
Leaning out the window saying, "You there, fine fellow. What strike is it today?"
Why? Which one is it today? Who's striking?
I think it's still the nurses'
the
strike.
railroads. Oh, okay.
And they don't strike very often, but things are like really bad there. like really bad, as in like you could actually freeze to death, like in Buffalo bad?
In England.
In England.
Yeah, well, put another coal on the fire. He's feeling better now about
Well,
that.
there's nobody can afford coal.
Oh.
Right, you used to get a
Put
coal in your
another
stocking, a lump of
orphan
coal
on
if you
the
weren't
fire.
good. Now you can't even afford a lump of coal.
Huh. Lucky. We were lucky.
Right. So,
Right.
I think they put a graphite pencil in. That's like all you can afford.
Oh.
So
Right.
the
Burn half.
economy there's terrible, and they still after all this time, when you read the conservative papers,
Yes.
they still can't deal with the fact that like Brexit was a really bad idea.
How can they not realize
There must be
that,
some other reason.
Can't
Can't be Brexit that we're in the way it is. It's got to do with, I don't know, something.
I don't know. Where are the... oh, well, okay. I mean, economic integration into a larger market, it tends to go fairly well in terms of economic growth. And I mean, it might not be the fairest growth in the world, but it's kind of a proven concept, I think. People are joining trade associations all over the place.
Right.
All right.
So,
Well,
it's
some of them are striking
if
these
you
trade
follow that,
associations.
it's a really interesting evolution of ideas, you might say.
Devolution.
Here's one
perhaps,
from The
but-
Spectator, 26 November 2022, in defense of Brexit, just to
Really?
give you an example.
What paper?
The Spectator,
Okay.
the NRO
Right.
of British journals that I happen to read. I don't always read the papers. It depends upon what's going on there that I want to follow, but I tend to peek at the opinion rags every once in a while.
Sure. Well, preserve your strength.
Right,
Spell
and
everything
I
wrong.
think part of the reason is that the Brits have Regrexit, as it's been called, because
Yeah.
when you look at the opinion polls, they tend to realize that like this is a really bad idea.
they did
But the
fabulously well
polemicists
under-
really are having trouble letting go, shall we say?
Yeah, I don't understand. that.
Their best defense is, put simply, Brexit is a project that needs to be judged over decades.
No.
We're making this adjustment.
All right. I mean, there's a little island off of this major, landmass that is currently integrated. How can you cut yourself off?
Well, here's the rationale, just so you know what
Yes.
it is. Okay. Above all, Brexit was a call to abandon an economic model based on low wages and unskilled labor and to start a painful but necessary adjustment to a better model. That may slow the economy, at least at first, but this economic pain should force employers to offer higher wages, think more creatively about training British workers, and use automation more so people can be more usefully employed.
Oh,
so this is from
automation more, I see.
the owner's point of view.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a conservative viewpoint.
Well, it's,
I mean,
I don't know what you'd call it.
you can't say that, I mean, when was the last, I mean,
That's
conservatives
like saying,
what we need is higher
conservatives support
wages.
Trump. I get that they're radical nutcases, but
Yeah.
they are conservatives.
I mean, I guess so. I just never heard conservatives saying, well, what we're really trying to do here is raise wages and train people for higher income employment. Well, I don't know. Our American conservatives have certainly become the opposite of that, and are more interested in making sure they keep wages low. I understand their complaints.
Wages are a thing on the balance sheet you really try to get rid of. It's a cost, not a benefit in any sense.
For them.
But what they're really saying is we don't want those non-Brits here, and
Yes.
so you got to do whatever you got to do in order to get there. So the racist, background behind that is so ingrained you can't even see it.
Yeah, I guess so. That's a better way of explaining it. Okay.
Anyway, there's that. Here in
Stupid
the
guys.
colonies,
Yeah.
we have Republicans making moves toward entering 2024 primary against Trump. From the Washington Post, Hannah Knowles writing, their actions reflect a growing sense in the GOP that the former president is far from an inevitable nominee. Or as
Fair
Robert
enough.
Costa put it on Twitter over the weekend, sharks smell blood and they're circling. So that's not to say Trump can't win the nomination. He can, because the way he won the last time is to have a bunch of people thinking he's weak. They all got in. They split the vote, and he wins with 32% of the vote because everybody else splits it. And that's
Yes.
how he does it. And so the fact that they smell weakness and Mike Pompeo wants to jump in, or John Bolton threatens to run, gives you an idea of the weakness of the Republican field.
Boy. Yeah.
They're obviously not. They're not only not scared off by Trump. But I would point out the important part of this, they're not scared off by DeSantis. They understand how weak he is.
Point. Yeah, there's certainly nothing inevitable about him.
DeSantis, he's a smarter version. DeSantis is a terrible campaigner who's like awful person to person. To know him is to hate him.
Mm-hmm.
He's Florida protected. He's Jeb Bush. Florida governors always look strong because the Florida
they're crazy.
Political
and huge.
structure is such that governors have so much power there.
Yes.
Also true in Texas, where lieutenant governors and not so much governors, but lieutenant governors have incredible amounts of power.
Yeah,
and of course,
weird,
of the size of the state, the governor just commands attention from the media.
Mm-hmm.
But once you get out of the state and try to go national, all of a sudden you don't look so good.
Okay.
That's what happened to Jeb. That's what's going to happen to DeSantis, in my view. It's not that he's not a threat. He is. It's not that he's not awful and scary. He is. But I just don't think he's that good and that strong. And obviously other Republicans think the same thing because they're ready to jump in to spite him.
All right. If he comes out with a yard sign that says "Ron!" !
You'll know what's going on here.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's an excellent point about Florida and Texas are states that they have to take the governor seriously on a national
Same
level.
with California.
Right. True. Although,
on our side, but the fact
because
is
they're Democrats,
so big
they say,
that,
they're
of
weird.
Course you
and
demand
fruitcakes.
attention.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're paying attention, and DeSantis is doing everything he can to be,
a jerk,
the worst guy in the world, and use the incredible power of the governorship in Florida, try to
and Greg Abbott
something that he doesn't
keeps trying
have.
to up him. You did that. Well, I'll tell you what. Why don't we just round up a bunch of migrants?
Yes.
And we'll send them to Kamala Harris's house and stick them out in the cold.
Super. No one
because,
will
like,
think
we're
you're
really good
copying
people,
anything.
and we want you to understand that we're just doing this to save you.
Yes.
We're freezing people from other countries so that you can be warm. Well, how does that make any sense? It doesn't have to make sense. I'm saying it, so you have to report it.
There's only a certain amount of heat to go around, and they're hogging it all.
Exactly right. And these people from other countries, those people,
right?
You people, and you know who you people are coming over here and sucking up American heat. That's really the basis for why we need Brexit.
I guess so. Does it make any sense? No, of course not.
No, of course, but it doesn't have to. So from the piece, many operatives said they see benefits of sitting back and methodically preparing while Trump deals with growing problems. The former president faces several investigations, criticism of his associations, including a widely condemned dinner, and growing calls in the party to go in a new direction. Trump's certainly not who he used to be, said Mike Dennehy, a longtime GOP consultant in New Hampshire. And also, he's not generated overwhelming enthusiasm for his candidacy from his rollout of his I'm running. Polls showing he's not unstoppable. Many prominent Republicans declined to endorse him. Many others becoming more outspoken in the criticism. He hasn't had a campaign rally since announcing his campaign. A spokesperson for Trump didn't respond to a request for comment. My theory, and that of many others who I stole it from, including Maggie Haberman, by the way, who's been in the news for other reasons, says that one of the reasons he's not holding campaign rallies is he doesn't have any money. And one of the reasons he doesn't have any money is he's a weakened force.
Okay. Well, that's a good reason. It's cold, too, is another thing. But he can do them indoors.
Yeah. So,
really.
It's cold now, but it wasn't cold when he announced, and he still hasn't done any rallies.
Yeah, that's true. He keeps a weird rally schedule. He'll do rallies when there's no real reason.
Right. And by the way, Haberman is in the news because she's been seen as Trump friendly by transcripts from Cassidy Hutchinson and others that are official transcripts and presumably not just hearsay. But
something
who knows?
To the effect of hearsay,
I heard it,
however.
About Maggie Haberman, so that's why she's been in the news.
Say what I hear say.
Yeah.
All right. I don't think there's anything hearsay about it.
Right. Anyway, so we should know by the middle of the next quarter just how serious Trump is about running and where things are at. The big news, I think, over the last week or so is the actual official January 6th report coming out, not just the transcripts, although the transcripts are fascinating. And as historian Julian Zelizer says in the New York Times, the January 6th report is out now. The real work begins, just like with Watergate.
Wow. Okay.
And who's a historian, remember, when I look back at Watergate, what I see is not a self-correcting constitutional system. I see an era where a reform coalition of legislators, organizations, and journalists took it upon themselves to try to fix the institutional problems that had enabled President Richard Nixon to do the bad things he did. And again, I lived in that era, and one of the frustrating things is how institutional players and characters, including journalism, up until the publication of the Watergate stuff and Pentagon Papers, enabled Nixon and Republicans to do what they did. Like, you couldn't say a bad thing. You weren't allowed to report about bad things.
Okay. I mean,
sounds familiar. It sounds like the W era during the Iraq War.
Oh, yeah, that's...
But, those of us who lived through that weren't totally despairing of things never getting themselves back on course, because we had also lived through Nixon. And those of us who lived through both weren't completely despairing about what was going on with Trump and democracy. We actually did pretty good this election, and that was all a good thing. And things are correcting, but they're not self-correcting in the sense that it just happens. They're self-correcting because people work hard to correct it. So I think it was a good reminder from him about what it was like back at the Watergate.
All right. So the question is, do you see what he sees?
Yeah. As a result of their efforts, there's a burst of legislation that attempted to constrain the executive branch. The War Powers Resolution, the Congressional Budget and Impoundment Control Act of 1974, and Federal Election Campaign Act of 74. And, things that are actually, as we were talking about briefly on the break, things that are now traditions. Weren't always traditions.
Right, true. They're fairly new and vintage, but we do run all our campaigns and such by the FEC. The whole FEC is an outgrowth of Watergate reforms.
Yeah. Listen to the names of these things and the years, and realize they're actually not so old. So the Federal Election Campaign Act of 1974 that established the Federal Election Commission.
Yes.
Disclosure requirements were 71, but FEC is 74. The Foreign Intelligence Service Surveillance Act, FISA, remember FISA? 1978. Ethics in Government Act, 1978, put in place tighter financial disclosure on public officials and prohibitions on lobbying, including the Independent Counsel Law. Actually, I think that expired. The Presidential Records Act of 78.
Yes.
Somebody might be prosecuted under that in these days, in these times. Right? And many of the reforms are flawed. Some eroded over time. Like Supreme Court saying, no, you can't do campaign spending limits.
Yeah.
And 1999 was the year that the independent prosecutor law expired. But the problem shouldn't eclipse the way that reform curbs some of the most egregious abuses of power. Right? So if you, for example, had grown some cojones and actually impeached Trump and banned him from running.
Yes.
That doesn't fix all dictators coming forward from that point onward.
It does not.
But it addresses, at least some of the problems.
Yeah. Well, it's a good time to keep in mind that a lot of those reforms put in place post-Watergate were not designed, this will magically prevent anyone from becoming a dictator or attempting to become a dictator. The point was, this will give you the tools to prevent it or, either prevent it from succeeding or at least fight back in an earlier stage. And I'm sure that there are some framers of that, framework who would say, this is what we gave you these tools for.
Right.
Why
well, the way I would put it, I think that's right. I think that's absolutely right. The way I would put it is, look, we are building some extra guardrails. Now, if you are hell-bent on going over them, not much I can do.
Right. Yeah. But that's true. And I think that listing, by the way, of that you gave us, and the fact that, one, they were all put in place to push back on what were then just plain abuses of power. We wouldn't, I guess you couldn't say quite yet at that point, Republican abuses of power. But it has become the pattern that Republicans are the ones pushing back on those guardrails and dismantling them where they can, and then going straight past them afterwards.
What did he know, and when did he know it?
Yeah.
That was Howard Baker, Republican.
That's
sort
true.
of semi-refusing to just get rid of
But
Nixon.
a never-Trumper kind of thing.
Only after.
Yeah. But it took him a while. But I was just thinking about it here. Trump's in trouble
protected.
with all of these.
His impeachment wasn't a sure thing until the smoking gun surfaced from Alexander Butterfield and the tapes.
Okay, this is true. The thing I wanted to get around to though, but you find Trump is in trouble with, well, of course, he's not currently in trouble with the FEC, but that's only because the violations of campaign finance are so far beyond what the FEC normally polices. This is like international espionage level checking. But
not to mention fraud and grift.
Mm-hmm. And his complaints about FISA and the FISA court authorized warrants against Carter Page in his campaign.
Because he was a spy.
Yeah. And all of these reforms that were put in place were put in
legal
place
system
to stop
put these
somebody
crooks
like
in
this.
jail that worked for me and were my campaign managers.
Yeah. But it's amazing that, we have those rules because every 15 years or so, Republicans throw out the rule book and say, I'm going to smash through these guardrails. And we're getting worse and worse at stopping them from doing it. And then they show up at the Capitol now every once in a while. Apparently, they're going to show up there and sack the place.
So Zelizer, the historian, deals with this tangentially and agreeing with you. He says Democrats and reasonable Republicans have to play the long game as reformers did after Watergate by revising proposals, keeping public attention on the issue, and being prepared to move forward on legislation when opportunity emerges. The good news is there's a wider range of groups like Common Cause, Brennan Center, working on the issues. And moreover, the radicalized Republican Party ensures the threats won't disappear from public attention. So if you like paying attention to this sort of stuff, don't worry. You have a Republican Party who's going to be keeping it on the forefront.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. The Republicans kind of went into retreat after the Nixon thing a little bit, so they didn't want to show their faces for the most part.
So here's some reforms. 6 reforms are most pertinent. First, as the January 6th committee recommends, Congress has passed the Bipartisan Electoral Count Reform Act. Snuck it in there while you were all getting ready for Boxing Day, which is part of the omnibus spending legislation, which passed, which was really frustrating for the reporters for the broadsheets. Politico and Punchbowl and Puck and those sorts of things.
Puck.
It was like it all passed.
Yeah.
And there was like almost no drama about it.
Yes.
And Schumer said, no, we're going to get the electoral count in there. And they did. And they got enough votes.
Yeah.
And then they went home. And it was like, how are we supposed to write day after day after day about the drama on the Hill when there isn't any?
I don't know. You gotta get a new theme.
Well, that's your problem. It's your business model, not mine. The bill clarifies the vice presidents cannot change the electoral count. Would make it more difficult for the House or Senate to object to the electors. Good start. Further changes needed. But that was one that was done. Second, the committee has correctly proposed instituting tougher measures to combat white nationalist groups and violent anti-government groups. That's a proposal. Not done, but proposed. Third, as the committee recommends, Congress needs to impose stronger penalties on those who would threaten election officials in the peaceful transfer of power.
Penalties.
We'll see what happens there.
Darwin
and, by the way, speaking of threatening people, I see a lot, which really annoys me, people complaining that Trump and Republicans have intimidated Merrick Garland so that he's moving slowly, because obviously he's moving slowly because he's intimidated.
He's a bit of a slow mover.
And these things take time because you got to build a good case. It would be disastrous to lose one. But, when I hear that, I have to point out, are you also saying that the Georgia folks are intimidated and moving slowly? I mean, these things just take a long time.
That's a good
point. And the
point.
Georgia case will probably come first.
Nobody
writes that. Oh, well, that person is just like totally scared of
Fannie Williams, right? Yeah, that's true. No one is saying that. It's just fashionable to say that about Merrick Garland.
They shouldn't say it about Garland either. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I was going to try and get somebody to say it, but no. No, you're right.
Related to that, the committee proposes that the joint session of Congress where the electoral votes are counted be designated a national special security event with appropriate protections.
Okay.
Fourth, the committee proposes strengthening the ability of Congress. Now, it's an 800-page report. I don't think you're going to read the whole thing, so I just thought I'd tell you it's
I am not.
The committee proposes strengthening the ability of Congress to enforce its subpoenas. change would give the legislative branch greater muscle. Maybe they will build a real jail in the basement of the Congress. Who knows?
They should think about it.
Instead of just giving that as an office to John Fetterman, because as a rookie, he gets the basement office. And he does, by the way. He gets the basement office.
Does he? All right.
Yeah, apparently there is an office in the basement, and he got it.
Okay. Well, not in the Capitol. It's over in one of the, let's say, the Hart Senate office building, because that's the one that springs to mind. They might have a basement.
Well, it doesn't matter where the jail is as long as it's in the basement.
That's right. And he might like that. He's a kooky kind of guy, and he might think that was fun.
Yeah.
Hosting the jail.
Well, he may even wear his baseball cap on backwards.
Well, or wear shorts to the Senate, for all I know.
But I don't think he's going to wear his hoodie backwards. You can't see if you do that. But the January 6th recommendations are only the start. Congress must also pass legislation restoring federal protections of the right to vote, the bulwark of any functional democratic system. And finally, Congress needs to renew efforts to stem the flow of private money into elections. Well, that'd be nice, but the Republican Supreme Court won't let you.
Yes, that's true.
It's a key source of distrust in politics. Of course it is.
Yeah.
But they don't care about trust. They just care about winning.
Right. So look out for that.
These are things that are
I don't know what to
proposed
tell you.
or might happen or might not happen, but have been proposed, and I think it's all a reminder that Watergate didn't fix everything it wasn't supposed to. And these reforms, some will succeed, some will not pass, some will fail. But it's important to keep pushing for them, because then there'll be a different scandal and there'll need to be different reforms. And that's the natural history of things.
Yes. Sometimes all it
That's
takes
the point
is
of all
that
this.
alarms are raised. So.
Right. It's not like, we fixed everything and we could sit back and then just not worry about democracy. You have to worry about it all the time.
That's right. Let
me put it a different way, okay? If we win elections and Biden wins and he gets to nominate a really good Supreme Court justice,
all right.
It doesn't mean, now we don't have to worry about the courts. You always have to worry about the courts.
You worry about everything.
Because stuff's always going to come up. Yeah, and pay attention to all of this and worry about everything. That's actually exactly right. And so don't turn your back on politics if you're interested in policy or fairness or democracy or any of those other things, or really good Christmas carols. Whatever it is, pay attention.
One of the things we're worried about now is that you guys might stop worrying.
Yeah, so
don't do that. Do you worry about what I worry about?
Or as, again, in 1962-63 era
carol.
film,
Yes.
Dr. Strangelove.
Yeah.
Or How I Learned to Stop Worrying About the Bomb.
Well, start worrying again. I think.
Yeah, the
it's
trouble with me
message.
being old is I
Somehow.
make all of these free associations, about stuff that you may have forgotten about or never heard of, and I think is really interesting, and you don't.
Well, this is a problem
It happens. That's
for
what
me
happens
as
when you
well.
get old.
It's just a different era of things.
Yeah,
So it's a
exactly.
there's still 2-3 generations behind me who doesn't know what he said. This is the second time he mentioned H.R. Puff and stuff. What is wrong with
Hey,
this guy?
listen, there are people who think the 70s had the best pop music, I can't help you.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Even I would admit that that's probably unlikely.
So the last theme, we do have a couple of pieces to cover, so probably this will drive us through the hour, this is David French summarizing the oddly intense anger against Zelensky explained. There's a couple of pieces about that. And I have one from Kathy Young, which I should probably start with because she wrote the original one. Even French winds up referring to it.
Okay.
And that was over at the Bulwark.
Yeah.
And she's talking about why the right is just so angry at Zelensky.
Okay, that's a good question. They're very...
And they are, and she deals with it first. This was written on December 22nd. Putin's useful idiots, right-wingers, lose it over Zelensky visit. The anti-Ukraine right can't stand America standing as the arsenal of democracy.
Okay. Not.
She gives some great examples, but I think in a lot of ways just makes it too complicated. Makes it all high-minded and falutin, highfalutin and all that sort of stuff.
This is too much
And it really
falutin
isn't,
around
but
here.
gives examples. Donald Trump Jr. I mean, you heard it. We talked about it a little bit on the show, I think, when Zelensky spoke to Congress. He dressed in olive drab fatigues. And they
Yes.
started getting on him for what he was wearing. Donald Trump Jr. tweeted, well, he was basically blunt about it. Zelensky's an ungrateful international welfare queen. So he got it all in there, right? You have to hate Zelensky. Welfare, I have to bring up welfare in your mind. So let's make it racist.
Sure.
And I'll even do queens, so you think of drag queens. I got it all in there. You got to, be with me on this.
That's a good one. I mean, it's an excellent evil that they would try and sneak that in there, though. I didn't even think about that. All right. Well, yeah, all right. So why are they so mad?
So she writes, and Byron York, who's a useful idiot for them, tweeted, Zelensky's apparently prepared to tell Congress that whatever the U.S. has given Ukraine is not enough.
Mm-hmm.
So she phrases them as national conservatives.
Right.
Remember, she puts it in quotation because she's a conservative and she hates that they've co-opted this.
Yeah.
And, and as I told you, I call them NAT-C, National Conservatives.
Yes, right.
Nazis.
And you're right. What are they doing?
Newsweek opinion editor Josh Hammer, who played the obviously Putin is a thug and Ukraine's a victim here, but went full Putin this time around with a piece. And Josh Hammer, who shares Zelensky's Jewish heritage, also accused the Ukrainian president of being a bad Jew. Unseemly under any circumstances, but all the more so considering only a few days earlier Hammer had been spotted at a New York Young Republicans Club gala in the company of various alt-right types who, shall we say, have a complicated relationship to anti-Semitism.
Yeah, they're bad Jews, too.
Like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Jewish space laser lady.
Yeah. I have seen some great t-shirts
people, lately. Jew-baiting troll Jack Posobiec. So Hammer's deputy op-ed editor, progressive-turned-populist Batya Ungar-Sargon, for whom I must mention I used to write during her stint as an editor at The Forward, at least made an effort to stay classy while making a de facto pitch for throwing Ukraine under the bus. What she wrote is, it's possible to admire Zelensky and the Ukrainian people's bravery, resilience, and fortitude in the face of a malevolent, godless foe, but recognize his fight isn't our fight and his request shouldn't be granted.
Oh, well, don't do
And,
that.
To me, it's really simple. Okay, Zelensky said no to Trump, end of story.
I guess that must be it, because there's really no other explanation.
And then Putin got mad and he told Tucker Carlson to go ahead and push the idea that Zelensky's a jerk. And that's what it is.
Okay.
Congratulations,
well, that is easy.
And I'll talk to you on Wednesday.
Okay, well, thanks. You crammed that in there. Perfect. Well done. See you then. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. You caught me with the cookie. I forgot. It's just the 1 minute break. And so I'm just going to eat it here. Although really I can't because there's nobody to talk to while I chew. And you don't want to hear that. Anyway, a delicious chocolate crinkle cookie, not because it was the best breakfast it was the best breakfast available. But very close by were the chocolate chip cookies, which I make out to be a better breakfast cookie. But the bag was facing the other way and I had only seconds to grab one. And so here I am with the chocolate crinkle. So, okay, with that important business out of the way, I am fascinated by this. I actually spoke to Greg just a little bit during the break that it just comes down to that. There's these several articles, and I guess your editor demands much more from you than what it could really be. It was one line. Why does the right hate Zelensky? And the answer is that he was mean to Trump. He did a bad thing to Trump. That is to say, he refused to do the terrible crime that he was asked to do on Trump's behalf, and didn't even speak up about it. By the way, he we found out after the fact. He just said it's best for me to. Well, for one, to try not to do this crime. Secondly, to not explicitly say that I won't do the crime necessarily because I'm in a very bad position here. But I'm not going to do the crime, but don't tell him I'm not going to do it. Let's see if we can get his help, because and it may come anyway, because everybody, I think, knows pretty well that America eventually is going to have to help us fight off the Russians. It's in their interest to do so. And I guess he probably didn't anticipate that Trump would say, no, it isn't. Let's let the whole thing collapse. Who cares? I'm not actually here to defend America or American interests. and I think he wasn't really counting on that. But he doesn't do the crime, but he doesn't go out and expose him either until everyone else here in the United States does that work. And then at that point, I guess, even so, he was never speaking up and anti-Trump and saying he was trying to get me to do this terrible thing. He stays quiet, which is about the best you could have asked for in Trump's position, except that Trump, I guess demands blood from everybody. So I think that's probably the best explanation that you can get for that. It all boils down to that, but I guess you have to write it in a longer version in order to get past your editor. Okay. So let's see. Why don't we jump into Pocket and see what's there for us to sort through? There are lots of things here. And let's see. Just Security, I think, has two offerings that I think will be of particular interest, and they're usually pretty interesting and weedy and good for the show. But I won't kick it off with the major highlights of the January 6th report version. Instead, though, I want to go over to this more interesting and slightly more specific item from Ryan Goodman. Is that right? Yes, Ryan Goodman's piece. This is a throwback. I didn't even realize that. Okay, I was wondering what it was doing here in today's roundup, but somebody must have referenced it recently on social media and put it, because this is from July 19th of this year. It's not way back, but I wonder what brought it to mind. I thought it was, or maybe it had been brought to our attention in light of the release of these transcripts, and that they may perhaps fill out some of the picture that was being argued for here in July from Ryan Goodman. 8 top experts on strength of Dominion suing Trump for defamation if he wants to. It's an awkward headline, and I think they probably could have cleared things up. But okay, so he's speaking to several top, legal experts in pursuit of the story that, Dominion voting systems who are suing some of the Trump Kraken lawyers and succeeding might be able to sue Trump directly for defamation. And I suppose that this was probably being circulated again, maybe even by Ryan Goodman himself, in light of the release of more evidence from the transcripts that were being released that would bolster the case that Trump, what it all comes down to is this is the part of the transcripts from people saying, yeah, Trump knew that he had lost the election. We told him so. He acknowledged it in his own fashion, but then said, let's go ahead with these things and these plans anyway. And by the way, let's continue to drum up anger about the election being stolen, and we'll talk about Dominion voting machines. And that's where he then begins to run afoul, not just afoul of, the law and the Constitution, and this is the person who won the election, and that should therefore be the president, la-di-da. But also actual, solid, real thing business interests that can sue you for money, and that's what motivates Donald Trump. And so maybe this would be of some interest. So among the many significant revelations coming out of the hearings of the January 6th Select Committee, even as far back as July when they were conducting those hearings, now just bolstered by the release of some of these transcripts, is information concerning Dominion voting systems. Former senior U.S. officials testified that they privately informed former President Donald Trump that allegations against Dominion had no merit and did an internal Trump campaign report, and yet Trump continued to make such statements against Dominion in public. Dominion has brought defamation suits totaling well over $1 billion against Trump associates, but not Donald Trump himself, or at least not yet. And I think the release of the transcripts was, I guess this must have made its way to my desk by probably Ryan Goodman himself or maybe others, saying now with even fuller information and fuller quotes from these interviews, it should probably now be beyond doubt that Dominion should be filing this suit and can win this suit if they file it. So I asked at that time, back in July, leading legal experts about the potential strength of Dominion bringing a defamation suit against the former president. I asked them each independently. It wasn't a panel or anything. Their responses below are in full, so I guess we're going to hear it. Long-winded, I bet. Let's better get started. Almost every expert said a defamation suit brought by Dominion against Trump would be very strong. Very, very strong, right? But one expert raised concerns about the practicality of such a lawsuit, and another raised issues of presidential immunity. We'll see. Maybe those things are now overcome. As shown below, I wrote the prompt to allow respondents to bracket the immunity question or address it if they preferred. We may revisit that issue in the future. Maybe that's what's happening now. In the meantime, readers may be interested in the recent D.C. District Court ruling that Trump did not have immunity from civil suits involving his rally speeches and other political activities to secure incumbency between November of 2020 and January of 2021. Trump has also continued to make public statements since leaving office, repeating some of the same allegations as before, but it appears with reference to voting machines rather than Dominion by name. That apparent change came after Dominion filed its first set of defamation lawsuits on January 8th, 2021. Very close on the heels, of course, of the 6th, that 2 days, as a matter of fact. So I guess that changed his approach to his defamation. He tried to make it more vague, and maybe that's why he hasn't been the target lately. But I guess now with the transcripts coming out, they might be able to get more information about maybe his more private defamation of Dominion voting systems to aides, etc. So below is the the prompt that I provided to each expert and their responses. The prompt went like this. Dominion Voting Systems has brought defamation lawsuits against several defendants for hundreds of millions of dollars. The company has achieved initial success in court decisions such that the parties can now proceed to discovery. Cases that have reached this stage of litigation include Dominion suits against Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, and Mike Lindell, the MyPillow guy, and then some links to news about that. Also, Patrick Byrne, he's the Overstock guy, Newsmax, and Fox Corporation, all being sued in all of this. Just Security recently published a chart that, among other things, includes a comparison of what senior U.S. officials and Trump campaign officials privately told Donald Trump about false or otherwise baseless claims against Dominion in the 2020 election, and B, what Mr. Trump said publicly about Dominion between November 3rd of 2020 and January 6th, 2021. The evidence of the private communications is drawn primarily from recent testimony and other documents produced by the January 6th House Select Committee, and I guess now it's even clearer. Based on the information in the chart and any other publicly available information, do you think Dominion would have a strong case of defamation if the company decided to sue Mr. Trump? In addressing this question, please feel free to assume that Mr. Trump would not have any immunity from a civil suit brought by Dominion for defamation. Some of the responses. Again, this is back in July. Floyd Abrams, who has practiced First Amendment law for the past half century and taught at Yale Law School and Columbia Law School and Journalism School, by the way, and is the author of 3 books about the First Amendment, of which the most recent is The Soul of the First Amendment. And you can't get any deeper than that, I guess. And his response reads as follows. Assuming there is no immunity for Mr. Trump, for statements he made while president, Dominion would have an extremely powerful libel case against him. Statements Trump made about the company were extraordinarily defamatory, provably false, and enormously harmful. So what defense might he have? New York Times versus Sullivan and later libel cases do offer a defense for false speech about public people or entities, which Dominion may be held to be, if it was uttered without what the court has characterized as serious doubt of its truth or high degree of awareness of its probable falsity. Right? You all, I think, know from years of discussion of this topic that here in the United States under American law, that basically if you are, even speaking poorly of defaming a public figure of some kind, that there's a higher bar to reach before you're held liable, you're able to hold someone liable for defamation if they're a public figure. And the argument here is Dominion as a big time publicly held, I don't know, public held, but a big time corporation, playing a significant role, say, in American life and running the elections and the subject of a lot of news reports. Does that make them a public figure? And so therefore, it would require a higher showing, a higher standard of demonstration that they've actually been defamed here. And one, that's in some doubt. But two, they may have cleared that bar anyway with the things that Trump said. There is, of course, a question that might arise if such a defense were offered, which may be all but limited to Trump himself. Does he have any concept of truth, as that term is used in our society, right? I guess just to back up. So if they had to meet the higher standard, the standard would be, well, can we demonstrate that he knew or had serious doubt about either that he knew it wasn't true or had serious doubts about it being true? Did he have a high degree of awareness of its probable falsity when he said it? And they say unique to Donald Trump is you might be able to argue he's got no idea what true means. He doesn't have any relationship with the word. It doesn't apply, and that might be a defense that it doesn't apply to him. He doesn't have, you may have serious doubt about its truth, but he doesn't, because he doesn't have any concept of truth at all. So that's kind of interesting. Does he have any concept of truth as that term is used in our society? Or might a jury be persuaded that he believes everything he says because he has no comprehension of what truth and falsity mean? I mean, that would be pretty easy to convince somebody of. I might even believe that. I might convict him anyway, but, if you were making the argument, oh, Donald Trump doesn't have any idea what truth is, I might say yes to that at the outset anyway. It says much about our former president that such a possibility even must be raised. That is a interesting insight. John Goldberg is the next one up here. Carter Professor for General Jurisprudence at Harvard Law School. They got a chair for everything at Harvard Law School. Lawyers for Rudy Giuliani, Mike Lindell, and Sidney Powell have made various arguments why Dominion's defamation claims against their client should be thrown out of court. For example, they have maintained that statements about Dominion's voting machines being rigged or manipulated were mere expressions of opinion, not statements of fact, and as such cannot be the basis of defamation liability. They have also argued that Dominion has made no credible allegations that these defendants knew they were uttering false statements or acted with reckless disregard as to possible falsity, as required by the actual malice standard of New York Times versus Sullivan. Courts have so far rejected these arguments, concluding that Dominion has adequately alleged that each of these defendants made false and defamatory statements of fact about Dominion, and that they did so with actual malice. Absent settlements, Dominion will have to prove these claims, but it seems quite likely that they will be able to produce enough evidence that a jury could hold one or more of these defendants liable to pay Dominion significant money damages. Applying the same standards to a claim by Dominion against Mr. Trump, it seems almost certain, and this is being emphasized in bold here. Whose emphasis is it? I don't know. But it seems almost certain that the company can credibly allege that he made statements about Dominion that are defamatory, and can further credibly allege that these statements were false and made with actual malice. I mean, everything he says is said with actual malice. I mean, I don't believe that he has any understanding of the truth, but I don't believe that he says anything without malice in it. So, I mean, I don't know if you saw this. We didn't discuss the fact that I guess he used Stupid Truth Social yesterday to put out a Christmas message, and the Christmas message was, everybody hates me, they're all against me, they're liars and bastards and communists and thieves and whatever. A very Christmassy message. I mean, there's malice in his Christmas message, so I think it's pretty easy to find malice in his political messaging. Anyway, where were we with this? Yes, as noted above, actual malice encompasses reckless disregard for truth. William Barr has testified to Congress that in his capacity as Attorney General, he told Trump in no uncertain terms that the claims about Dominion's voting machines being rigged had no merit and indeed were, quote, idiotic. By itself, this statement might suffice to establish recklessness. And the case for recklessness is even stronger given other information available to Mr. Trump that cast grave doubt on the validity of his statements. Nonetheless, for reasons having nothing to do with the merits of Dominion's defamation claims, a suit against Mr. Trump is unlikely to succeed. This mainly is because the Supreme Court in Nixon v. Fitzgerald in 1982 held that sitting presidents enjoy absolute immunity from civil liability for actions taken in an official rather than personal capacity. While President Nixon's actions in that case can be distinguished from Mr. Trump's because it more clearly involved an exercise of the powers of the office, the Nixon court took pains to instruct lower courts to bend over backwards to treat actions by a sitting president as official rather than personal. Thus, under Nixon, if Mr. Trump's statements about Dominion were made while he was in office, he will probably be adjudged immune from liability. Interestingly, Nixon's absolute immunity rule lacks the sort of textual or historical basis that a majority of current Supreme Court justices purport to demand for recognizing constitutional rights or privileges. That's an interesting point, too. But to date, only Justice Thomas has indicated an interest in revisiting the court's immunity decisions. So a conservative court could lean on Nixon v. Fitzgerald to say that he's immune as a sitting president, but then somebody, probably Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, would point out, because she's been very adept at challenging these assumptions or these stories, the tall tales sometimes that conservative justices tell about the founders, and say, well, show me in the Constitution where this is, or where did the founders discuss the idea of a president immune from prosecution or even civil liability for anything that he does because they'll make it all official. That sounds almost entirely too difficult to believe that the founders would have said, what we need is an all-powerful, totally immune president. I doubt very much that they would have be able to find any historical or textual basis for that. But then they would say, we're only originalists when we want to be originalists. When originalism wins a case for us, we're originalists. When other stuff wins cases for us, we're other stuff. And it's not that difficult. And he's probably right that we should certainly be watching out for that. Finally, Mr. Trump's lawyers would argue that he benefits from additional statutory and common law immunities, and these arguments could, in theory, succeed even if, for some reason, the argument of constitutional immunity were to fail. All right, so look out for that. Roy Gutterman, or Guterman, I don't know how he pronounces it, but it looks like Gutterman, but, probably Guterman, Associate Professor, Communications Law, and Director of the Tully Center for Free Speech at the Newhouse School at Syracuse University, brought to you by Carl's Jr. These titles, honestly. Even if there are numerous examples of false statements and ample evidence of falsity, which there might well be here, suing a former or sitting president for defamation honestly does not seem practical. The speech, even if erroneous or knowingly false, might fall outside First Amendment protections, especially if they were spoken by an ordinary person, not the President of the United States. Amending the defamation suit to include the president would draw attention away from the speakers who went on TV and made the false statements. The speech at issue could also ostensibly be covered by the First Amendment and the rules and standards that emanate from Times v. Sullivan case in 1964. In establishing the actual malice rule or privilege, the court made an analogy that public officials cannot face liability for their actions in office, so they should not be able to easily sue critics of their actions while in public office. In an ironic twist, the Times v. Sullivan case is the case that Trump publicly criticized when he vowed to, quote, open up libel law. If this precedent is overturned, it would make it a lot easier to sue speakers like Trump when he publicly says false and potentially defamatory things. The Dominion lawsuit focuses on the broadcasters and some of the highest profile speakers who went on TV to propagate false statements about the election. For the media, this reiterates a level of responsibility broadcasters and other news outlets have for the content of the news they disseminate. The lawsuit may end up compelling broadcasters to be more cautious with their live on-air guests and what they say and how the anchors or reporters challenge or counter false information. A defamation case against a sitting or former president would be highly unusual. As far as I know, the only time this has ever happened was in 1915 with Theodore Roosevelt. But that was a simpler era. And then he doesn't bother to tell us why. But he's probably right. Let's see. Larissa Lidsky, Raymond and Miriam Ehrlich, Chair in U.S. Constitutional Law at the University of Florida, Levin College of Law.com. Brought to you by Cheetos and Doritos. Actual malice is a term of art that entails actual knowledge of falsity or reckless disregard for truth on the part of the speaker. The Supreme Court has stated that actual malice requires sufficient evidence to permit the conclusion that the defendant was in fact entertained serious doubts as to the truth of his publication. In St. Amant versus Thompson, the court said that actual malice exists if a defendant invents a story, bases it on an unverified anonymous telephone call, publishes statements that are so inherently improbable that only a reckless man would have put them in circulation, or publishes them despite, quote, obvious reasons to doubt the veracity of an informant or the accuracy of his reports. In other words, actual malice can be found where a speaker sticks his head in the sand to avoid hearing evidence that he doesn't want to hear. Based on what President Trump was told repeatedly by credible U.S. senior officials and campaign officials, the president had obvious reason to doubt the veracity of the assertions he was making about Dominion and election fraud. Thus, Dominion would potentially have a strong case against the former president for making defamatory and false statements about them with reckless disregard for the truth, though the ultimate success of that case might depend on a jury's evaluation of witness credibility. Okay. Good point. No discussion of immunity there, but I will remind you that, remember, the prompt says assume that there isn't immunity here. It's interesting. I wonder if they all said, well, take away that assumption. All their answers may be, oh yeah, it was totally defamatory, but I assume that they will let him off the hook because of some sort of immunity, either real, imagined, or invented as necessary. And some people wouldn't leave that out of their answers. Others said, I'm following the instructions and ignoring that. But other than that, if he wasn't the president, it would be defamation, open and shut. Zar K. Saeed, Charles I. Stone, professor of law at the University of Washington School of Law. I should probably just, tell you the schools that they're professors at and just leave out the chairs. But now it will be unfair to some of the chairs that come later, but they're rich people. They're doing fine. Dominion, says Professor Saeed, could have a very strong case if it sued Mr. Trump for defamation. Simplifying contemporary libel law a little, most plaintiffs must prove, 1, the defendant made a statement with defamatory meaning, 2, about or of and concerning the plaintiff, and 3, published it to a third party, 4, with a requisite level of culpability ranging from negligence up to actual malice. Mr. Trump has reportedly made defamatory statements about Dominion voting, thus easily satisfying element 2, that is, of and concerning the plaintiff, and 3, publication. Of the first element, whether a statement is defamatory is generally a question of law for the court. Courts consider first whether the statements consist of fact or protected opinion, and next, whether the statement is capable of bearing defamatory meaning. For example, Trump's ellipse speech incorrectly alleged that Dominion's machines switched thousands of votes from Trump to Biden in Michigan and were associated with a 93.67% error rate in Fulton County, Georgia. These are statements of fact susceptible to verification and thus differ categorically from statements of opinion. Merely qualifying a false factual assertion with an opinion does not imbue it with constitutional protections that would immunize it from liability for defamation. Had Mr. Trump preceded these comments with the disclaimer, "In my opinion," they would nonetheless remain false statements of fact. Nothing you can do about that, I guess, in his view. As statements of fact, they are also clearly capable of bearing defamatory meaning and fall into the category of per se defamation, in which harm may be presumed based on the nature of the communication. Defamation per se tinges the plaintiff with incompetence, incapacity, or unfitness in the performance of one's profession. And the citation offered there. If Dominion voting systems truly were plagued with error rates in the 90s and was changing votes through manipulation or incompetence, this conduct would undermine their entire business, at least in a rational market. Indeed, Dominion claims in its other lawsuits that these spurious allegations have caused it to suffer damages amounting to about $650 million. In sum, Mr. Trump's communications leave no room for doubt about their allegedly factual nature, not their defamatory impact. Okay. By continually maintaining that a business that operates voting machines knowingly and intentionally subverted a presidential election, he has satisfied the first element of defamation. The fourth element, we'll try and squeeze this in quick, the requisite level of culpability on the part of the defendant can set a notoriously high bar for some plaintiffs, thanks to New York Times versus Sullivan. The court eliminated strict liability for defamation claims, imposed new constitutional limits on state defamation laws, and created heightened standards, actual malice, you know about that, for defamation of public officials. More after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Do you want to hear more? There is more, which I guess at some point we could cut this off at this point and say, it sounds like the legal experts are pretty sure that absent any weird formulation by the Supreme Court, they could invent anything at any time, I guess. But absent any immunity, which was the prompt, everybody basically says, yeah, there's almost no question that he spoke in defamatory manner about Dominion voting systems and their product. Though there are some really interesting details that they go over, and I imagine if they ever go ahead and sue him, well, we probably should have waited for them to do that and then read this. But now you'll know on the day that there's an announcement what the odds really are. So it's important that you know this, I think. Where were we? We were just reading about Professor Zahar K. Saeed from University of Washington Law Schools. Rundown of the four elements of a defamation case, and basically saying he's kind of meeting them all here. The fourth element being, we left off with the requisite level of culpability on the part of the defendant, and that can be a notoriously high bar for some plaintiffs, thanks to New York Times versus Sullivan and criticizing public figures. So, where were we? The court eliminated strict liability for defamation claims, imposed a new constitutional limit on state defamation laws, and created heightened standards, actual malice, for the defamation of public officials. Plaintiffs required to prove actual malice must show that defendants possessed knowledge of falsity or reckless disregard with respect to the truth or falsity of their statements. Sullivan's progeny, that the New York Times versus Sullivan case, broadened the rulings to public figures, and subsequent case law mostly continued to build speech protective momentum around speakers and issues of significant public concern. Speech about the 2020 presidential election's big lie and the corresponding debunking of all claims of election fraud remain matters of pressing public relevance for our upcoming midterms, now past us, and presidential elections. Courts have accordingly held Dominion to this higher standard and required proof of actual malice. Despite the difficulty of meeting this standard, in most cases it is likely to be satisfied here. Mr. Trump was repeatedly briefed by employees who have now testified under oath that they informed him that the assertions he was making and continued to make were false. Their testimony will disprove the notion that Mr. Trump lacked awareness. Why not? Mr. Trump lacked awareness of the falsity of his communications, or that he even entertained serious doubts about the nature of his communications, then and now, as he continues to press false claims against all evidence to the contrary. Dominion is likely to prevail on this element as well. For many reasons, legal tools have not provided much protection from the abundant misinformation infecting nearly every aspect of our lives. The tort of defamation could and should provide a robust epistemological check on at least some forms of egregious myth peddling, such as those that target and tarnish reputations. Removing access to the platforms on which a liar spreads lies provides one form of abatement. I guess he's in favor of the Twitter ban for Trump. Holding Mr. Trump legally liable for defamation would allow courts to levy damages, provide compensation to those directly harmed, and provide significant public and institutional censure that could herald a change in our legal system's apparent tolerance of outright misinformation. Maybe. Although the real issue, I think, is with giant pools of dark money floating around, can't you just start to assume that defamation liability is a cost of doing business and continue on upon your merry way? I guess it's possible. David Schultz is next, director of the Yale Media. Oh boy, he's from Yale, okay? He's not he's the director of the Yale Media Freedom and Information Access Clinic and senior counsel at Ballard Spahr LLP. So he's not a professor, but okay. Could have gotten past it that way at any rate. Would Dominion have a strong case of defamation if the company decided to sue Mr. Trump? He repeats the question. Yes. Is his answer. The First Amendment provides no safe haven to those who knowingly spread lies that damage reputations, and those who do can be held accountable for the damage they cause. Based on the public record, Dominion has a very strong case for defamation against Mr. Trump, with one potentially significant impediment. I don't know what the impediment is to my saying the word impediment, apparently. There are 5 things Dominion would need to prove to establish a claim for money damages. He's got 5. The last guy had 4, but okay. It must show that Mr. Trump, 1, made a statement to others. Okay, come on. 2, about Dominion. Yes, done. 3, that was both false and defamatory. And 4, that he did so with actual malice. And 5, his statement did in fact damage Dominion's business. The known facts suggest that Dominion should be able to meet its burden on each point. There appears to be no doubt that Mr. Trump made statements about Dominion. You could combine 1 and 2 into one thing here. You have to show he made statements to others. Okay, sure. You can just say he made statements to others about Dominion. That's 1. But okay, so it should be easy to do that because everybody knows he did do that. There appears to be no doubt that Trump made statements about Dominion that have damaged its business. There is also no doubt that many of these statements were provably false. The real issue, as in most defamation cases involving public figures, would be proving that Mr. Trump made the statements with, quote, actual malice. He does elide the point of number 5 there, that the statement damaged Dominion's businesses. It probably did, but, you would have, I don't know. To me, I'd say, well, okay, let me put a dollar figure to it and show me the methodology. Did anybody cancel contracts based on this idiot's say so? I'd be surprised by that, but it probably did happen. Anyway, actual malice is where he wants to focus. That's the standard of fault that the Supreme Court requires all public figures to prove to prevail in a libel claim based on a statement involving a matter of public concern. Everybody's assuming that Dominion gets treated as a public figure here, by the way. The court recognized in Times versus Sullivan that factual errors inevitably creep into the give and take of robust public debate. To avoid chilling speech on matters of public significance, the court held that the First Amendment prohibits public figures like Dominion from asserting defamation claims based on innocent factual mistakes. Dominion would thus need to prove that Mr. Trump made a false statement knowing that it was false, or with reckless disregard of whether or not it was false, the standard of actual malice. Based on the public record, Dominion should readily be able to establish this element too. Indeed, it might well be easier to make this showing in a case against Mr. Trump than in some of Dominion's pending cases. It has been widely reported that Trump was told that his claims about Dominion voting machines were untrue and some were so inherently improbable that only a reckless man would have put them in circulation. Solid evidence of actual malice, and that's, of course, the test from St. Amant versus Thompson. Congresswoman Liz Cheney, vice chair of the January 6th committee, got it exactly right last week when she said Donald Trump cannot escape responsibility by being willfully blind. The one impediment Dominion may face is the statute of limitations, the period in which litigation must be commenced or it becomes time-barred. Most states have a 1-year limit on defamation claims. Florida's limit is 2 years. Depending on what state law governs, Dominion could now sue only on statements made by Trump in the past 1 or 2 years. Anything he said in the immediate aftermath of the election may be time-barred. We'll see about that. Next up, Sierra Torres Speliscri. I'm guessing at the pronunciation of the name. Stepson University College of Law and the author of the book Political Brands. At President Trump's Stop the Steal rally at the Ellipse on January 6th, he said, there's the highly troubling matter of Dominion voting systems. In one Michigan county alone, 6,000 votes were switched from Trump to Biden, and the same systems are used in the majority of states in our country. Then, to back up his claims about Dominion, Trump pointed to the findings of Georgia State Senator William Ligon, Ligon, who had held hearings on the problems in the 2020 election and concluded that Dominion voting machines employed in Fulton County had an astronomical and astounding 93.67% error rate. It was only wrong 93% of the time in scanning ballots requiring review panels to adjudicate or determine the voter's interest in over 106,000 ballots out of a total of 113,000. That doesn't sound like it's right. This tirade about Dominion's voting machines on January 6th wasn't a new ploy by President Trump. One web page tracking his accusations logged 46 Trump statements impugning Dominion's voting machines. And President Trump had said nearly the same thing on January 4th, 2021 in Georgia on the eve of the Senate runoff election when Trump argued that the Ligon Committee then heard additional testimony concerning voting irregularities during the 2020 general election. First, the Dominion voting machines employed in Fulton County. That's the home of Stacy. He forgot her name. Had an astounding 93.67 error rate. 93.67 error rate in the scanning of ballots. He forgot the word percent. On closer inspection, one of the primary sources of Senator Ligon's committee's misinformation about voting machine irregularities came from Rudy Giuliani, the president's then lawyer. Giuliani told Senator Ligon's committee, those Dominion machines are like Swiss cheese. You can invade them. That's a weird way of putting it, but okay. You can get in them. You can change the vote. No credible sources backed up Giuliani's version of events. Thus, President Trump on January 6th and other occasions gave the appearance of providing objective proof of voting machine problems when the, quote, evidence he relied on was really just from Trump's own delusional circle of outside lawyers who, according to the January 6th committee's revelations, were providing these ginned-up stories of problems with the 2020 election as part of a callow plot to hold on to power after losing the 2020 election. So what would happen if Dominion and Trump sued Trump for defamation for lying about fake problems with their product? Dominion has pending defamation cases against Fox, Newsmax, and OAN for spreading substantially similar lies about the company's role in the election. Given what the public now knows, thanks to the January 6th committee about President Trump's post-election lies, Dominion would have a robust defamation case against the ex-president, too. Well, it seems like everybody kind of agrees, but we'll give one more guy a try. Timothy Zick, professor at William and Mary Law School, and co-author of the First Amendment Cases and Theory. Assuming the former president is not immune from civil lawsuit, and that's a big if, I think Dominion would have a very strong defamation case against Donald Trump. If the company is a public figure, it would have to prove Trump made statements about Dominion with actual malice, meaning he knew they were false or when made or acted recklessly with regard to their truth or falsity. There is substantial evidence to support that claim. Trump would likely argue his statements were hyperbole or some form of campaign rhetoric. But in several other defamation cases Dominion has filed, including against the Trump campaign, courts have consistently rejected the claim that the allegations against Dominion were not intended to be statements of fact. Indeed, Trump's tweets and other public statements about Dominion's alleged role in rigging the 2020 election, specific claims that voting machines in Michigan were faulty or altered to favor Joe Biden, and assertions that the companies had error rates of 68% and 93.67% are all provably false. Trump would also likely argue that his statements about Dominion relied on information provided by auditors and lawyers, but there's no evidence that Trump knew the statements about Dominion were false. But there is rather evidence. It's the exact opposite. There is evidence Trump knew the statements about Dominion were false when made. His own attorney general told him the assertions were idiotic and had zero basis. In fact, other senior Justice Department officials also told Trump that what he heard about Dominion voting machines was false. Nevertheless, Trump continued to publish false statements about Dominion. As Attorney General Barr told the January 6th committee in his discussions with Trump about Dominion, there was never an indication of interest in what the actual facts are. That, of course, is the very definition of actual malice. Okay. Well, it's interesting. I wonder what the statute of limitations against false publication are here in Virginia, as we now have found out that that Loudoun County, or rather special prosecutors targeting Loudoun County, and the school board here and the Board of Supervisors have decided that that's something you can charge people with: false publication, lying to the press and having them publish. This is not defamation, although, defamation would probably fall under the same. I think it could be charged the same way. Did he have to make the statements in Virginia, or could it be enough that he caused Virginia publications to publish this information? And if we have a 2-year statute of limitations, maybe you want to sue here. I don't know. I'm just hung up on that stupid charge that they came up with in the special grand jury here over the Loudoun County cases. All right. Well, let's see. Do we now give over the rest of the show to Just Security as well? Probably not. I may have to read that. This is a very long article that they put together, the major highlights of the January 6th report. And I probably, now I feel like I should have done that one first, but I'd like to review that one, perhaps off the air, and we'll discuss it later on. But this, I think, gives us a good chance to look ahead to see whether or not we should predict that Dominion will file suit. And I guess maybe to do so in Florida, where there's a 2-year statute of limitations, but that statute's coming up. Maybe they want to file quickly before January 6th and get that done. All right, let's see. Other things that we might want to share with you that, similarly, we're probably not going to get through. But this was an article sent to me by my brother Mark, who I don't know what he thought. I'll tell you what I think, though. This is another one of those opportunities to introduce a new player to the rogues gallery of people you should be watching out for, and maybe somebody who finds themselves in trouble. Speaking of all the Trump lawyers who got sued for defamation themselves, here's another name to add to the roster from Michigan. I don't think this name has been called a whole lot on the show. The Michigan lawyer pushing Trump's voter fraud fictions in U.S. courts. And I guess you better watch out. This is a Reuters investigation, and they're talking about Stephanie Lambert. Have we called her name before? Stephanie Lambert was a defense attorney with financial woes before seizing on the election denial movement for new business. What do you know? The grift saved her, I guess, but it may sink her in the end, too. Now she faces potential disbarment and a criminal investigation into voting data hacks. Her journey highlights the key role lawyers played in a struggle shaking American democracy. Nathan Lane, Layne, and Peter Eisler are the reporters on this piece from just the end of last week, the 23rd. Stephanie Lambert was a Detroit defense lawyer working on a succession of routine criminal cases, theft, drug possession, and firearms charges. Then Donald Trump's 2020 election loss transformed her life, as it does with a lot of lawyers, parking lot lawyers, etc. As Trump started falsely alleging voter fraud that November, Lambert began reinventing herself as a key player in his campaign to overturn the election results. She pushed conspiracy theories in court, joined efforts to break into voting machines seeking evidence of fraud, and organized a nonprofit that has raised at least $500,000 to finance election challenges. Lambert advanced quickly to the vanguard of a campaign by pro-Trump lawyers to perpetuate the election denial movement through the nation's courts. That movement endures despite the wholesale rejection of its baseless claims by judges across America, and despite the poor showing in last month's midterm elections by Trump-backed candidates who embraced his stolen election falsehoods. In Arizona, election conspiracists Carrie Lake and Mark Fincham, who ran as Republicans for governor and Secretary of State in the midterms, have claimed that they were cheated and challenged their losses in court. Neither Fincham nor Lake responded to requests for comment. Lambert started in her home state of Michigan, joining 4 lawsuits on behalf of Trump supporters. They included 2 within weeks of the 2020 election that challenged Democrat Joe Biden's victory based on debunked fraud allegations and sought to impound voting machines across Michigan to inspect for evidence. She has worked with a lawyer pursuing another 4 lawsuits in Pennsylvania, 3 targeting state and local officials, and 1 against Dominion voting systems. What do you know? According to court records and Lambert's social media posts, the suits relied on similarly debunked claims. A Trump spokesperson did not respond to requests for comment. Lambert has also been involved in unauthorized breaches of sensitive election equipment in 3 states. According to a review of legal filings, police records, and people familiar with the matter. Who are those people, you might wonder? Such violations can expose confidential voter information, enable election tampering by revealing security protocols, and raise questions about the vulnerability of voting systems to manipulation. And then once again, it's the favorite play of Republicans. I'll prove to you that this crime can be committed by committing this crime. And then they get caught in order to prove that they committed the crime, and then that's actually proof that you can't commit the crime without getting caught. So, yeah, whatever. Anyway, Michigan's Attorney General accused Lambert in August of engaging in a criminal conspiracy to seize vote tabulators. Lambert denies any wrongdoing and remains defiant. "I am not intimidated," Lambert said in a statement posted to social media after being named as a target of a state probe. She called herself a voice for the American people. She is a voice. In a July 2021 interview with 2 right-wing websites, the Gateway Pundit and 100% Fed Up. That's some site, I guess. I never heard of that one, but whatever. Lambert, 41, declined requests to be interviewed for this article. In response to detailed written questions from Reuters, a lawyer representing Lambert, a lawyer for the lawyer, sent a cease and desist letter demanding that the news organization halt publication of this story, saying its inquiries included fraudulent misrepresentations. She's going to sue them for defamation, eh? I don't think so. This account is based on interviews with more than a dozen people who have worked with or know Lambert, as well as hundreds of pages of court documents, previously undisclosed emails from her associates, and police reports related to the alleged conspiracy to access voting equipment and data in Michigan. So she's really taking it to the streets, if you will, trying to break in and steal voting machines on top of just making these stupid claims. The reporting reveals that Lambert, sometimes working with influential Trump allies, played a larger than previously known role as a coordinator and defender of voting system breaches being investigated as possible violations of state law. It documents how the former prosecutor, facing financial and personal struggles, emerged as a central figure in a movement of lawyers that is sowing distrust in American voting systems and administrators. Lambert and other election-denying attorneys say they are strengthening American democracy by pointing out its vulnerabilities to fraud and manipulation, or being fraud and manipulative, I guess. I would say. Legal experts say they are exploiting the courts to undermine voters' confidence in election results. Within weeks of the 2020 election, Trump and his allies filed 64 lawsuits in 6 battleground states seeking to overturn the results. They lost all but 1. a procedural victory involving a small number of Pennsylvania ballots that were irrelevant to the outcome of the presidential election. And yet, the avalanche of litigation has drawn lawyers such as Lambert, who were inexperienced in voting law, into a potentially lucrative new business of challenging elections and representing those seeking to disrupt them. Norm Eisen, a longtime election lawyer and former ethics counsel to Democratic President Barack Obama, sees Lambert as part of an ongoing threat to democracy. She is an important figure in the dangerous election denial movement, Eisen said in an interview. Lambert is still extremely active. The movement is not vanquished. Lambert has mostly operated out of the spotlight. I think that's probably true. She has worked with small town officials to access the election equipment and data used to advance baseless claims in the media and the courts, according to the Attorney General's investigation, and a review of court documents and right-wing websites. While she has aligned herself with Trump-supporting Republicans, Lambert has described her work as nonpartisan and revealed little in public about her political beliefs. Reuters was unable to determine her party affiliation, if she has one. Michigan's criminal probe into the alleged roles of Lambert and others in gaining unauthorized access to vote tabulators is ongoing, and last year a federal judge sanctioned and referred her for possible disbarment for joining a lawsuit aimed at reversing Biden's win in Michigan based on a string of false statements, including that China and Iran accessed voting software to manipulate the results. David Fink, a lawyer for the city of Detroit, is leading a campaign to sanction and disbar Lambert and 8 other attorneys who joined that Michigan lawsuit. Lambert, Fink said, is a leading architect of a strategy that jeopardizes future elections, using courts to promote and lend credibility to bogus voter fraud claims. He called her the queen of alternative facts in an interview. Because of the success they've had in creating a false narrative, Fink said, election deniers will pursue this strategy again and again until the courts slap them down and levy appropriate sanctions. Now on to some background about her. Lambert was struggling financially in the years before she jumped into the election denial movement, according to a review of court records from her 3 divorces. In 2017, she resigned as a prosecutor in Wayne County, where she had been on a solid career path, litigating hundreds of cases, ranging from low-level drug crimes to bank fraud and homicide, according to interviews with 4 former co-workers in the prosecutor's office and personnel files obtained in a public records request. She'd been full-time with the office since 2009, 2 years after graduating as class president from the University of Detroit Mercy Law School. By May of 2018, Lambert wasn't working and had, quote, no access to money, according to court records from the divorce of her 3rd husband, Nicholas Gentilla. She was caring for 5 children, my goodness, the records show, including 3 of her own and 2 from Gentilla's previous marriage. Great guy, huh? She said she was forced to borrow money from family and friends for necessities. So sounds rough. In a December 2018 divorce filing, Lambert accused Gentilla of draining her assets worth more than $200,000 by tapping her retirement account and other methods. Yuck. In the filings, Gentilla said the couple had lived beyond their means, racking up $70,000 in credit card debt. Gentilla did not respond to requests for comment. His divorce lawyer, Connor Ferrick, called Lambert a predator in a written response to Reuters, saying she siphoned and spent every financial benefit possible from her husband before filing for divorce. Ferrick said Lambert then feigned herself his victim through whole cloth misrepresentations. Wow. Neither Lambert nor her attorney responded to requests for comment on Ferrick's statement. In June of 2019, Lambert set up her own firm, according to a state filing, and started her criminal defense work. During an April 2020 hearing related to her divorce from Gentilla, Lambert broke down while telling the judge she couldn't afford to replace furniture, clothing, and other items she alleged had been removed from her home during the breakup. I'm sorry for crying, she said, according to a transcript. Not great. Rough times. Lambert owes her entry into the realm of election denial to one of Trump's most outspoken allies, Sidney Powell, a former federal prosecutor and white-collar crime attorney who made headlines seeking to overturn Trump's loss in the chaotic aftermath of the 2020 election. As Trump zeroed in on vote rigging allegations in Michigan, Lambert emailed the White House according to her July 2021 video interview with two right-wing websites. She attached an affidavit showing evidence of voter fraud, Lambert said, without specifying who alleged what in the document. The email bounced back, she said. She then reached out to Powell and to Rudy Giuliani, who led Trump's legal team, and then sent them the affidavit. Powell brought her on as a local attorney to handle the appeal of a federal lawsuit filed in November of 2020 against Michigan's governor. The suit sought to overturn Trump's loss in the battleground state, as most of those suits did. The suit made a host of fantastical claims. It alleged that corrupt election officials or foreign actors had rigged equipment made by Dominion voting systems to produce 289,866, quote, illegal votes in Michigan. That's pretty specific. Nearly double Biden's margin of victory there. It claimed Dominion's software had been hacked by agents acting on behalf of China and Iran. Dominion has repeatedly denied its machines were involved in voter fraud. Giuliani didn't respond to any requests for comment. Powell didn't either, saying only that Reuters' inquiries were wrong on so many points without detailing any inaccuracies. I don't have time to correct you, she wrote in an email response. Sounds pretty familiar. The idea that China hacked America's election system was one variation on the hammer and scorecard conspiracy theory, which posits that votes were manipulated with a supercomputer originally built for U.S. intelligence agencies to spy on foreign adversaries. As previously reported by Reuters, the theory became a central tenet of the rigged election movement. I don't think I've ever really heard that one specifically. On December 6, 2020, Lambert filed another federal suit against Michigan officials, also challenging the election results. This time, she sought a court order to impound all voting machines and software in Michigan for expert inspection. The suit asserted without evidence that there had been systematic attempts at mass fraud throughout the state of Michigan and the United States of America involving rigged voting machines. So then guess what? Lambert's client, this name you have heard, Dar Leaf. Remember him? Sheriff of Michigan's rural Barry County. Leaf is a leading figure among far-right constitutional sheriffs, many of whom have backed Trump's stolen election claims. So she got an introduction there to the world of idiots working on this stuff. Amazing.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, plenty more where that came from. Of course, perhaps we'll read that on later in the week. But next up, Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, including his kickoff story. Cassidy Hutchinson's January 6th testimony transcript was like a mob movie. Let's hear him go through it with a fine-tooth comb next.